Hello my amazing developers. So in the previous video, we looked at how to organize colors in assets library. Then we also looked at how to create extension of colors and to use them in code. Then we also looked at how to create a view that is responsible for switching between different types of cameras. And we also looked at code part that is related to switching between different types of lenses. In today's video, we will synchronize switch zoom view with supporting camera types. Then we will also look at how to switch between back and front cameras. Then we will create privacy view to protect our application in the app switcher. And finally, we will add orientation changes support in the capture session controller. So let's get started. We will start with synchronizing switch zoom view with the supporting camera types. So let's see how we can do that. So I have Xcode open up over here from the previous video where we left off by setting the zoom state on the capture session controller. So to synchronize the switch zoom view with the supporting camera types, we need to add additional code. So for that, we will be heading to the capture session controller. We will start by creating an enum of the camera type at the top of the file. And we will return all the camera types available, which all the devices support. That is the ultra wide, wide, and telephoto. Then in the class definition of the capture session controller, where we have the public access, we are going to create a new function over here. We are going to call it getCameraTypes. Which is going to return an array of the enum that we have declared. And make sure we set this as optional. So first we will check on the capture device if we have it. Otherwise, we are going to return nil. So we exit early from the function. And then we need to switch on the capture device type. So first we are going to check on the triple camera. And if we have the triple camera, we need to return an array that supports all of the features, all of the cameras. So we have the ultra wide over here, we have the wide, and we have the telephoto. Similarly, on the built-in dual wide camera, we need to return the ultra wide and we need to return the wide. Then we will continue with built-in dual camera. Here we are going to return the wide angle and the telephoto. And finally, if we have only the wide angle, we are going to return the wide angle. And in generally all the other cases, we are going to return nil. So now when the capture session is initialized, we need to notify the calling class that we are ready. So for that, we need to have a completion handler and we need to return that once the capture session has been initialized and start running has been called. So let's go ahead and create that completion handler. So on the top of the file here, we're going to name our completion handler with type alias capture. I'm going to call it capture session initialized completion handler. And its type is going to be empty type, and it's going to return void. Then I'm going to modify the initializer. I'm going to have another initializer where I can get the completion handler which type is escaping, and this is the type that we have created on the top, capture session initialized completion handler. And we need to call super.init So our NS object, the superclass, gets called, the initializer gets called, and we need to also pass in the initialized capture session. Here, completion handler, we need to pass the completion handler. Make sure we delete the previously written initializer as we don't need it. Then in the initialized capture session, we need to accept this parameter, completion handler. So let's go ahead and do that. In the initialized capture session, I'm going to have the completion handler. Its type is going to be escaping, and it is the capture session initialized completion handler, and need to call that once everything is fine and everything is set up. So now we need to update our code in the capture view controller. So let's go ahead and do that. Heading back to the capture view controller, we notice on the top where we had the capture session controller directly initialized over there. This is not what we want now. What we need to do is have an completion handler over here. So we need to call that in the viewDidLoad. So I'm going to create a method here in the private extension of the capture view controller. I'm going to call it setup capture session controller, and take the private lazy var. Instead, I'm going to name it private var capture session controller. It's of type capture session controller, and I'm going to force unwrap it. Then need to write in the capture session controller over here to initialize. So now we need to take the top of the code where we had initialized everything, and we need to take it in the bottom area. Here I'm going to paste the code for setting up the video preview view, but first we need to have the weak reference for the self. And always, like before, whenever we have closure, we need to get the weak as self. Guard let self as equals self, else return. Self.videopreviewView.videopreviewLayer.session is the self.captureSessionController.getCaptureSession, and same way self.initializeConstraints and self.setupSwitchZoomView. So first we are waiting for first we're waiting for capture session controller to initialize, and then the rest of the views on this view controller will follow. And from the top of the code in the viewDidLoad, make sure we call our setup capture session controller. So now let's add the code for synchronizing the switch zoom view with the supported camera types from our device. So let's head to the switch zoom view method. Here, setup switch zoom view, and here I'm going to get the type, get camera types from the capture session controller. Need to have the if statement. So first we need to check if we get back the capture types from the capture session controller. Then we need to filter through the camera types, camera type dot ultra wide, if we could not get back the ultra wide from the list of camera types on the captured device, then we are going to hide the ultra wide button on the switch zoom view. So need to call switch zoom view hide ultra wide button. Similarly, if the camera types filter and we could not get back the telephoto, camera type switch zoom view, we need to hide the telephoto button. And finally, if our camera types only has the wide angle, that means we are on a device where we have only one camera. So we need to hide the complete switch zoom view, where it will not make sense to hide and keep only the 1x button. So now we are going to create a view that will be having an option to switch between the back and the front camera. And we will also look at the code part for this. So under the views group, let's expand that and create ourselves a new group. I'm going to call it toggle camera, and under that, while it's selected, we need to create a new file. So here I'm going to call it CocoTouch file, CocoTouch class, and its type is of UI view, and it will be called toggle camera view. Going to copy that file, click next, and click create. Same way, I need to create the nib file. So need to right click on it and create a new file, and this time I'm going to create a view file. Click next and going to paste the name and click create. So same way like before, we need to select our view, and so make sure we zoom out a bit so we can see the view fully, and expand the right bar and select the size and freeform. Then we will also select the size over here and specify 60 by 60. And like before, to hide the bottom bar, just go to another view and come back. It'll be hidden. So now let's add the code in the Swift file for view initialization. Head to the toggle camera view and delete this piece of code and have ourselves an IB outlet for the content view. Going to have the init with frame, and make sure we call our init super.init. Same way it goes for the init with coder. Here, coder, and have custom init. So here I'm going to have a variable for the bundle.main, and I'm going to ask bundle that I need to load a nib, and I'm going to have a variable for the nib name. String describing self.self, and pass in the variable nib name. Owner is self and options is nil, and add subview for the content view, and content view frame is equal to the bounds of the parent, and content view auto resizing mask is set to flexible width and flexible height. And make sure we call our custom init in the init on the both override and initializers. Let's head to the nib file now and select the file owner and select the class property over here, and write in our name for the toggle camera view, and select the connections, and for the content view assign it to the parent here. Next, we will be opening up the library and bringing ourselves a button in the view, and need to set up the constraints. We will be setting 10 from all the sides, top, left, and top, bottom, left, right, all as 10, and width and height of 40. Then we will also specify the image as arrow.to.circle path. Then we are going to remove the button label, and make sure we also specify the background color to background alpha 60. And in the tint color, need to specify the text on background alpha. So now this is the previously created, in the previous video we created this color in the assets library. So we will be keeping the same name and selecting that for the white. And then in the let's specify the name for that, the label. We are going to call it toggle camera button. And we are also going to specify the layer.corner radius, the half of 40, that is 20. Make sure we select the type as number, and it will be half of 40, that is 20. So we need to have an IV action for this button. So let's go ahead and add that in the Swift file. Here, I'm going to have an IB action. Going to call it toggle button handler, and parameter is type button, UI button. As well as for the button, we always need to have the delegate. So let's have ourselves a protocol, toggle camera view delegate, and make sure we specify the name class. And we're going to have toggle camera tapped. And also we're going to have weak var delegate on the view, toggle camera view delegate. And in the toggle camera handler, toggle button handler, we are going to call in the delegate and fire this function, toggle camera tapped. Next, we need to connect the IV action. So let's go ahead and do that in the nib file. Expand the view, make sure file owner is selected, and in the toggle button handler, let's add that to the touch up inside. And make sure we have the toggle camera button and it's connected to the touch up inside event. Next, we will be adding the toggle camera view in Capture View Controller. So let's go ahead and do that. So in the Capture View Controller nib file, make sure we expand our views on the left. And from the library, I'm going to have myself a new view. And make sure we add it at the bottom, so it's not added as a subview to another view. And need to name its class as toggle camera view. And I'll be assigning following constraints. First, I need to set the color. Let's keep the color and first assign the constraints so we can see what's happening. So width and height, like before, was going to 60 and height is 60. And toggle camera view on the right edge to the safe area, we will be saying of 30. And it is same as the center Y, that is the vertical constraint to the record view. So I'm going to select both of these views and I'm going to say center. I'm going to say vertical centers. Let's also keep the color as clear color. So now we need to have an IV outlet for this view. So let's go ahead and add that. Let's head to the Capture View Controller Swift file, scroll all the way to the top, and here we can, or before the record view, we can have the IB outlet private weak var toggle camera view. Its type is of toggle camera view. And we need to connect this now in the nib file. So let's head to the nib file, select the file owner, expand the views, and in the connections, select the toggle camera view and connect it to the toggle camera view, which is this one. So now we need to remove the constraints that we are going to change in the portrait and landscape orientation changes for the toggle camera view. So while the toggle camera view is selected, let's remove the center Y constraint that is aligned to the record view. So we need to double click this and say remove at build time. Similarly, we will be removing the toggle camera views right, or the trailing rather, constraint, and removing this at build time. But we will be keeping the width constraint and the height constraint because those will remain same in this view. So now we need to head to the capture view controller and initialize the constraints properly for the portrait and landscape for the toggle camera view. Let's hide the right bar, and here need to have toggle camera view dot center Y is equal to record views center Y. Need to keep it same, no constant, and toggle camera's trailing anchor is equal to view dot safe area layout guide trailing minus 30. Similarly, in the landscape orientation changes, we will be adding the constraints in following order. For the toggle camera views, center X anchor will be aligned to record views center X. And also the toggle camera views top anchor will be aligned to the views safe layout guide top anchor with a space of 30. So now we need to run our application to see whether our changes are fine or not. So let's run the application. Oh, we noticed the red button, the record view and everything gets messed up. So we need to stop, and oh yeah, we forgot and we pulled in the initialize constraints in the after setting up the session controller. So we need to take this all the way up, and in the view did load we need to call this method initialize constraints. Let's run the application one more time. And that's what we want. We want our toggle view is appearing fine, and when we go into the landscape we have the constraints set up properly. Let's also stop the application and have the delegate set up. So we need to write ourselves an extension on the capture view controller and need to call the toggle camera view delegate and need to have the handler for the tapped method. So now I'm going to have a method set up toggle camera view and say toggle camera view delegate is set to self, and need to call this method in the view did load. We will be heading up after we have set up the initialize constraints. Need to call the setup toggle camera view, and here in the tapped method for now I'm going to have myself a print message that the toggle camera view was tapped. Toggle camera tapped. Let's run the app now. And when I tap on the toggle camera view, the button, we get the print message. So now we need to look at the code part, how we can toggle between the back camera to the front camera. So let's see in the capture session controller. So I open up the capture session controller, and here in the initialize capture session, we need to, once we have the device input, we need to get ourselves a property, set the capture device input to the property. So let's head and create a property on the top of the class. Same way like we did for the capture device, I'm going to have myself a private var capture device input AVCapture device input. And when we have the capture device input here, I'm going to assign it to self, like we did for the capture device in the previous video. So for the previously written function, the get video capture device, need to rename this to the back camera. So hold down the command key, click edit all in scope, and I'm going to call it get back video capture device. And also I will be needing to write a method to get the front capture device. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to call it get front video capture device. It's going to return AV capture device, and we will follow the same practice as we have written before. So we will try to get the front camera, that is the true depth camera, on the AV capture device default for true depth camera. Type is video and position is front. If we were able to get this camera, need to return it immediately, true depth camera. And same way, if we were not able to get the true depth camera, we will be trying the wide angle camera. So need to call the wide angle camera variable name, and same way for the AV capture device, need to use the default and use the built-in wide angle camera. For the media type is video and position is front. And here I'm going to return the wide angle camera. And if these both was not successful, we need to return false. Sorry, we need to return nil from here. So let's go ahead and update our initialize capture session, where we are defaulting always to the back camera. So here in the initialize capture session, we need to modify the code to also support for the passed as a parameter for the front camera or the back camera when we toggle between the devices. This currently defaults to the back video capture device. So before we update this code, let's head to the initializer. And once we have the super.init, we will be setting up the capture device to get the back video capture device. And head down to the initialize capture session. We're going to have capture device as AV capture device and going to set it to nil initially. So this is where we can support the default definition of the class. So default property of the class, where we have the capture device already initialized. We will be modifying the code in following order. We will say passed capture device AV capture device, and capture device is set to or rather we are going to have it named as temp capture device and set it to type optional, and temp capture device will be passed capture device. First, we can always start with getting the capture device from the class property, and if we get the passed capture device from the class, the function parameter, we will be using that and replacing the temporary capture device. And in the following code for the guard-let capture device, we will be checking against the temp capture device. If it is not there, we will be returning, and if we are fine, we will be continuing with the rest of the code. So let's go ahead and create our toggle camera code now by going all the way to the top of the public definition class area. and have ourselves a method over there, toggle cameras. So first we need to remove the capture device. Remove input, and we will be checking if we have the capture device input on the class. Go ahead and remove the capture device input. Then get the front camera, capture device, and call in the initialize capture session and pass in the front capture device. Completion for now, let's keep it an empty one. Next, we need to protect our application from the app switcher. That means when the application is about to go to background or we are in the app switcher, a person can see whatever the previously capture session or the camera process was going on. The photo was taken or the video was recorded, the last frame of the camera was still visible. So for this, we will be adding a blur view on top of our view. So let's see how we can do that. So let's head to the Capture View Controller nib file and open up the right bar, and also from the library I'm going to add a visual effect view. So I'm going to select the visual effect view with blur and add it in the view for the capture view controller. Make sure we add our visual effect view after the video preview view. And this is on top of the video preview view, and I'm going to assign its constraints to the safe areas all as 0. So our view fully expands to the edges. Then we will be let's keep a label for this view, visual effect view, and we will be needing an IB outlet. So let's head to the capture view controller, the Swift file, and just below the video preview view I'm going to create myself an IB outlet, private weak var, and call it visual effect view. And also need to go and connect the visual effect view by going to the file owner and selecting the connections, expanding the views, and selecting the visual effect view to the visual effect view. Next, we need to initialize the visual effect view with no effects. So for that, we need to first in the view did load have a call for setup visual effect view, and here in the bottom area of the code in the private extension need to create visual effect view, setup visual effect view, where we will be saying visual effect.view.effect is going to be nil. So now we need to have notifications when the application is about to go to background and when the application comes back from the background. So let's see how we can do that. So for this, we will be creating extension on notification. So in the groups for the extension, so I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to say Swift file, notification name custom.swift, and have an extension on notification.name and have two static var application did become active, notification.name, raw value going to be application did become active. Similarly, we need to have another property, static var application will resign active, notification.name, in the raw value application will resign active. So now in the scene delegate, we need to fire these notifications when the event is happening. That means when the application is about to go to background or when the application is in the active state, we need to fire these notifications. So let's head to the Swift, the scene delegate file. And in the scene did become active, we need to call the notification center dot default that post this notification with the name application did become active, because we are in the scene did become active method, and object I want to pass in is nil. I don't want any object. Similarly, when the application is about to go to background, it's resigning from its active state. Here I'm going to need and send the post notification with this name application will resign active, and the object is nil. We need to add support now for these notifications in the CaptureView controller. So let's head to the CaptureView controller, and in the private extension, I'm going to create a method register for application state notifications, and call in the notification center dot default add observer, but using the block. So for name is going to be application did become active, object is nil, and queue is the main queue. So we are on the main thread, and the block method for this, let's add enter over here so we can have the naming proper, the spaces proper. So we need to have a weak self and have the guard let self equals self, else return, and self.VisualEffectView. When the application becomes active, we need to ask its effect to be nil. And same way, so we need to have an animation for this. I'm going to say duration is 0.3, delay is 0, and the method is the options is curve ease in and out, animations is this, and we don't care about the completion, so I'm just going to keep it an empty. Say self.VisualEffectView.effect is equal to nil. Let's delete this line of code. And same way for the application when it's resigning from the active state, I'm going to say UIBlurEffect dark. So now the notifications are set up. We need to remove the observers for when the class gets deinitialized. So let's add the deinit method in the top area of the class here, and in the deinitializer we need to say notification center default remove observer for name. Observer is self, notification name is application did become active, object is nil. Need to copy this line of code and paste in for the application will resign active. And make sure we call our code to set up the notifications in the view.didLoad. Set up, or rather register for application state notifications in the view.didLoad. Next, we will add support for orientation changes in the capture session. So let's see how we can do that. So first we need to check what is the interface orientation on the window scene for the currently active window. So it's a huge step that first we need to get the list of windows, because applications nowadays can support multiple windows, and get the scenes from that, and scenes will have the interface orientation. So we will rather write a simplified code to get the interface orientation directly. So let's see how we can do that. We will be heading to the app setup file, and here I'm going to write in static var as a computed property that is going to return interface orientation, which is defaulting to UI interface orientation, and make sure we always set it to optional for the return type. And here I'm going to write the UI application.shared.windows first scene window scene, and the interface orientation, because we care only about one of the interface orientation from all of the windows. Now I'm going to create a controller that gives us the AV video orientation from the UI interface orientation. So let's go ahead and create that controller. I'm going to call it under the controllers. I'm going to create a new group and call it video orientation controller, or rather video orientation, and create a new file, say Swift file, call it video orientation controller.swift. Same way, I'm going to import AVFoundation and keep the class name as the video orientation controller, and need to have a static function get video orientation for the past interface orientation that is of type UI interface orientation. Make sure we also import the UI kit, UI interface orientation, and here I'm going to switch over the interface orientation type. If I am on the portrait, I'm going to return, I need to have the return type as video AVCaptureVideo orientation. And when we are in the in the portrait orientation, I'm going to return portrait. Same way, I am in the portrait upside down, I'll be returning portrait upside down. And in case I am in landscape left, no need to return landscape left. And finally, for the landscape right, I'm going to return landscape right. But make sure we always set this as optional, and in the default case, need to return nil. So now let's head back to the capture view controller, and in the below function for setting up the preview when we have the session, we will be creating a new method that will help us for the interface orientation changes for the video. Need to call setup video orientation in the after we have the session for the video preview layer setup. setup video orientation. Here what it will do, it will first try to get the interface orientation from the app setup, else it will simply return early from the method, and then it will get the video orientation and it will use the newly created video orientation controller to get the video orientation by passing in the interface orientation. Else it's going to return early from this method, and in the video preview view dot video preview view dot video preview layer dot connection dot video orientation, it's going to be the video orientation now. And make sure we call this method in the viewWillTransition method also. So head back on the top of the class where we had the viewWillTransition. In the animate for alongside, need to have a weak self reference over here. Guard let self equals self, else return, and call in the setup video orientation. So when we run our application, I have QuickTime opened up over here. We notice we don't get anything. That means something is wrong in our setup process. So let's stop that and fix the code. So in the capture session controller, we need to say self.captureDevice so it doesn't get this parameter that we have written. And now when I run the application, we notice there's a crash. So here is the QuickTime, nothing's running, and this is the capture session controller. That means the way that we have set up the code for capture session controller, it's not the right way. So we need to change the code a bit. So in the capture session controller, I'm going to remove the initializer from here and change it to override init and not call the initialize capture session, and also take the initialize capture session to the public area of the class. So let's head over here, and here we need the place for the initialize capture session. And also in the capture view controller, need to change the code over here a bit. What we will be doing is we will be initializing capture session controller simply and going down to the function where we have the capture session controller set up, and we are going to use the internal class property and say initialize capture session. We're going to use the completion handler variable like this. So now when we run our application, we notice that our capture device is fine now. This is what we expected it to behave. So let's test the code that we have written for today. And for that, let's head to the capture session controller. And let's say we don't have the triple camera device. So I'm going to comment this code to see whether we hide the telephoto. So if we have the ultra wide and the wide angle cameras, we need to hide the telephoto. So when I run our application, I notice in the QuickTime that we don't have the telephoto as hidden. So let's check that code. We were not calling the setup switch zoom view. So make sure we call that when the initialize capture session has been called. So here we can specify self.setup switch zoom view. And I'm also going to the capture session controller and comment the code for the triple camera. So make sure we go ahead and get the dual wide camera. So when we run our application, in the QuickTime player, our 2x, the telephoto, is gone. We can decrease the width over here, but that we can do it in the next of the videos. Same way, I'm going to test for the ultra wide. So stop the application, and same way, hide the built-in dual wide camera and hide the dual wide camera. Let's go ahead with the dual camera only. Let's run the application. And here, now the ultra wide has been hidden. We get the 1x and the 2x. That is the telephoto and the wide angle. And finally, if we are not on the dual camera, we are on the wide angle. And here also, I'm going to comment this code. We need to completely hide the switch zoom view. That's what we have here now. That is showing that if this device, iOS device, is only having the one of the camera. Let's revert all of this code. So now we need to toggle for the cameras. So let's head to the Capture View controller, and in the method for the toggle camera tabbed, we need to call the Capture Session controller to toggle the camera. So now when we run our application, and I'm opening up QuickTime, and when we tap on the toggle camera, we notice we get a blank screen. So let's fix this. Stop the application and head to the Capture Session controller. So in the toggle camera, once we have removed the device, we need to run this specific code for reinitializing the capture session on the next run loop, because there seems to be some kind of delay for the capture session to be initialized again. So let's bring up this code, and I'm going to have weak self as we are in a block, and guard let self equals self else return. Say self.getFront video capture device and call in the self.initialize capture session. So let's run this code now, the application, and open up the QuickTime. Here we have the application running, and when I tap on the toggle camera, hello, that's me. So we get the front camera. Next, we will be testing the privacy view that we have added to protect our application from the app switcher. So let's run the application. And I'm going to open up QuickTime. And so the idea is whenever we need to go to the background, our view for the capture should be blocked by the privacy view that we have used the visual effect view. So you notice as soon as I go to the background, our notifications are firing properly. And this is our application where we have the privacy filter set up. So you can see that we can still have the camera session running behind, but we cannot really make out what's going on. And when we come back to the application, our view is fully visible now. That's what we want. When we head to the background and when we come back to the application, so we need to hide and show the privacy view. Finally, we can also test the orientation changes. And I have QuickTime again open up over here. And here the application is back again. And when we rotate the device, we can get the proper orientation. Let's keep the QuickTime over here. And I can go back to portrait in this way. This is the landscape right. And let's switch to the landscape left, which is here. And back again in portrait, is this view that we can see. So perfect, our video preview view is also aligned with the Capture Session controller now. With that, we conclude today's video. Stay tuned to the channel for amazing content. If you like the video, hit like. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want me to cover any extra material in future, mention in the comments. I'll be covering that. Alright guys, thank you so much. Bye bye.